Welcome back to What's the Theory? Sarah and I thought it'd be really interesting to talk about what's the theory behind working from home. We've done a couple of posts on LinkedIn recently that have got quite explosive responses, but also some understandable ones. So we thought, why not make a podcast out of it and actually discuss it? Sarah and I have been in previous roles in different agencies and in-house brands over the years. Now we run our own agency, so we know what it's like to be owners and be in that position. So I think we've got quite a diverse perspective on like the working from home. I think in particular because when you're an employee, everyone stands together, don't they? And they're like, right, we should have this, we should have these benefits, we should be able to do this. And I feel like as we've gone into ownership, we've kept those principles. We've not gone like really strict that some owners do and go, oh no, now it's my business and I care about it more. I'm going to make everyone sit in a hot, sweaty office all day and like make sure down to the T they're doing every hour possible. And I felt like we've kept our values quite consistent throughout. So we've got a couple of opinions on working from home ourselves, but where do you want to get started, Sarah?
Well, I guess since we're in the middle of a heat wave, might as well start with that one. I think that was kind of the crux, and the thing that sets it all off is that we've seen quite a lot of different approaches when it comes to how businesses are approaching the heat wave. And you've seen articles from the BBC, what's appropriate to wear during a heat wave when you're in a professional setting, like all of this stuff. And in the last two heat waves, I did some surveys on LinkedIn to see, well, what do business owners think about this? And what do actually the employees think about this? It's very interesting to see that a lot of business owners said basically they're saying you don't have to travel to office, but you have to work as normal. There were some that were saying super flexi hours, which is something that we did. So if it's too hot during the day, just do some work early in the morning and then the rest of it in the evening when it cools down, whatever's easiest for you. And then there was three people that just said no change, everything's as normal. And I was kind of like, okay, fair enough. And then from the employee side, a lot of them were saying that their employees essentially haven't made any changes and they were really struggling. So it's really interesting to see that I had employers that were like, yeah, we're doing all these super flexi, or you don't have to come to the office, apart from the three that were like, with no changes. But then there were a few employees that were saying, when it came to their survey, a lot of them were kind of like, I still have to do things as normal. No one's even questioned it or thought about it. So it's interesting to see that. And I know, David, you've got a few stories of people who have had horror stories with this. But I think that was the thing that for me was like, if you can't even look at things in a heat wave, because I know there are laws around if it's too cold in the office, you have to like go home. There's a certain temperature or something like that. But there isn't anything about max office space. I think if it's like, you just, same with schools, you just kind of have to deal with it. But I think there comes a point where it's a bit irresponsible to just assume everyone has to pretend things are as normal. So I'm curious to hear your thoughts and stories on this topic.
Yeah, well, I think the heat waves exposed like a quite a large problem in the UK, especially with rising temperatures every single year. It feels like every single year now, in a lot of cases, it's getting warmer and warmer. And the UK famously doesn't have air conditioning anywhere. And that also includes the commute, right? So not everyone, believe it or not, has aircon in their car. Not every place has aircon in shops or buses or trains. Obviously, if you ride a bike, it's even worse because you're exercising, so you're exhausting yourself.
Yeah.
And I think what I've seen throughout this year's heat wave is a bit of an outcry for a lot of change in UK and business owners' perception on like what is an acceptable level of temperature to be working in. And I understand that we've got an economy that we need to keep going. We've got to, obviously, it's already hard. We need people to be working. But at the same time, we all need to live and operate in safe temperatures. I think the worst case scenario, and I think most people in the UK, to be fair, work in offices, in an office environment where there is no air conditioning. And I got a text from an ex-colleague of mine. I won't name him, but he sent me pictures of him literally drenched in sweat. And this was at lunchtime, I think it was. So he
Yeah,
sent me
yeah, it was
these
something like that.
WhatsApp images, and I asked him, I was like, as if you're being asked to go into work today, like, have you raised with your employer that like you're too hot, you're sweating, you're overheating, you can't work comfortably? And he was like, yeah, my boss just told me to take a shower because they had a shower facility at the office.
God.
So what he's been doing is every hour jumping in the shower, putting it on cold, and then coming out and rinse and repeating that process. And that's what he was sending me images of and being like, this is ridiculous. And that
Mm,
went on for such a long time. And I think the grey area is that I think in the UK there's not really like any specific employment laws per se around the safe working conditions. So theoretically speaking, even if it was 55 degrees Celsius, which would be ridiculous, inside of an office space, there's no employment law preventing the employee from, working from home. So I think that needs to change in regards to the heat wave. But I think businesses who have adapted to a flexible working policy, going back on the working from home debate,
yeah,
have absolutely won this year because people have been
yeah,
able to be comfortable in their own homes. You can literally sit in your underwear if you want to,
yeah.
and work, or like, you've got a paddling pool outside and you've got a fan on you and you don't feel embarrassed because you're sweating loads. And I think those with great flexibility policies have got the best out of their employees. So I think from a performance and
Yeah.
happiness perspective, it works wonders there. I just don't understand how businesses haven't adapted post-COVID
Well,
anyway.
that's an interesting point to raise because I think to us work because we allow super flexible. We are pretty much fully remote, except if you do want to go to the office, which people have the option of doing. I think a lot of businesses have adapted and they do have flexible
Hmm.
working, but it's like, is it flexible working? Because it's still enforced, say, 3 days in the office. So you still have to come in on specific days. So it's more hybrid working in that sense. And it isn't like still flexible working. So, as an example, you still have a lot of, yes, you can work from home 2 days a week, but I expect you 3 days in the office and you actually have to be in during these specific hours. So you have like set hours. You can't even just come in when you want to. It's still set hours. And I found that with a lot of those businesses, there's a lot of that mentality of, we've got a really cool office. It's got air conditioning. You should come to the office more often. But reality is we basically forked out a ton of cash and we want to get a return on investment is what it really is. But does working in an office actually increase productivity? And I think that's the theory that we're trying to kind of unpack today. Like, you and I, we've worked in full time in office. We're pre-COVID people. We have done full office. We have done COVID where it's fully remote. We have done hybrid working. We've done the 2 days in office or 2 days at home, sorry, 3 days in office. We've done basically all the different combinations. And now that we're also managing all these different combinations and have managed in previous roles, we've had different, employees with different kind of ways of working. What can we actually really say about productivity? Because I would argue that our stance on it versus other potentially employers might be different. And to kind of set the scene, my previous role, and that wasn't the only role. I've had a few roles where essentially the stance was that Teams calls, Google calls, online talking to each other ruins communication, ruins productivity, and ultimately client work suffers. And there was a big push for not allowing online calls, coming to the office as much as possible. And if you left the office at the time that you were meant to leave, so say I came in at 8, if I left at 4 or 4:30, but I still had a lot of work to do, you would get told off because the thinking was, well, if you've got work to do, why are you leaving? You should be in the office finishing your work. So that was the stunt in productivity. Now, I have a slightly different view on that, but I'd be keen to hear, because obviously, same as me, you've done all the different roles and managed different types of people. Do you think that productivity and communication suffers when people work from home?
When it comes to productivity and communication, no. I think it's actually the opposite. I think productivity and productivity in particular increases, I think, quite
Yeah.
substantially when
Yeah.
when people are working remote. And that's for a number of reasons. One, you wake up, if you've got the right flexibility policy, of course, you wake up with enough sleep so you don't have to rush out the door and get somewhere on time. And let's say, I
Yeah.
don't know, you start work at 10 a.m. versus the
Hmm.
standard, half 8, 9 o'clock in the morning at an office, which in reality you'd have to wake up at 8 a.m. to then commute in. I think because of that reason, people are more productive, but also if there is that flexibility allowed, people work around their current lifestyle, which in turn makes them happier and more productive. I think
Yeah.
where there's a disadvantage to working from home, and I think it is really the only disadvantage, is probably like culture. And when I say culture, I mean things like, togetherness and
Yeah.
feeling connected and like a group and and
Mhm.
and, and feeling a better sense of purpose. And I think those
Yeah.
things can also still exist in a fully remote business, right? If you're
Yeah.
doing regular Teams calls and you're messaging each other, yes, that can still exist. But I do think
Hmm.
the culture is more powerful in the office. Is it a reason
Yeah.
to make people and force people to go into the office? Absolutely not. Culture is absolutely vital to any
Yeah.
business. And I think giving people the freedoms of choice is the
Yeah.
right approach, because people will come into the office if that facility is available, those who want to,
Yeah.
right? And those who can't or aren't going at the minute will either just not go because they want to maintain that working from home, that's their lifestyle, or they'll get a
Hmm.
fear of missing out and just go anyway and join
Yeah.
those little moments in the office. But I've found that when I am working in the office, there are too many distractions, and same could be said with home, but I have my own like private office at home. I think a lot of people do nowadays.
Yeah, they did. Yeah.
But in the office, there's, the gossip and, oh, what did you
Yeah.
do last night? And the conversations that are a bit like
Yeah. Yeah.
you're not bothered about having, which I guess is where the culture part comes in. But I always
Yeah.
find I get distracted and I don't end up doing anywhere near as enough work as I usually
Yeah.
do at home.
Yeah, definitely. And that's something that I'm really bad for, because when I'm in office, I just end up talking to someone. I don't get
Yeah.
anything done. I just chat to everybody, or I book all my meetings on the day I'm in the office so that if I've got, say, one-to-ones or anything like that, we can do it in person, which is, I guess, what I would use my office day for. But I think what's been interesting, and again, I did a survey on this. We did a survey internally with our team, but also a few LinkedIn ones. And it was just more to ask, if you had a choice, what would you prefer? And it was very interesting to see millennials, pretty much every single millennial said they like flexibility. So they would like to still work in office, but choose their days. So essentially, if I feel like coming in, I will come in. If I don't show up for 3 weeks, also nobody will care.
Yeah. Hybrid.
Gen's,
Yeah.
yeah, basically, but super flexi hybrid, not like set roles hybrid.
Yeah.
Gen Z, interestingly enough, Gen Z, a lot of them, and we saw this, we've got one Gen Z, I'm going to call it Henry here, sorry, anonymous survey, but we know who you are, Henry. And then to be fair, a lot of people on LinkedIn of that younger generation were pretty vocal that they actually would like to go to office full time because they're missing that culture. They're missing, it's harder for them to connect online, which I suppose I get, but I think because I'm pre COVID. I've worked in an office full time and I have experience going in every single day and having those really rigid rules of you have to be there every day. And I don't look back on it fondly, if I'm being completely honest. I have a lot of, there are a lot of times where I went in, but I know if I could have stayed home that day, one, I would have probably gotten a lot more done. This was always the worst around deadlines because the minute I went into the office, if you put your headphones on because you wanted to focus, you were seen as rude because people
Mm.
would want to talk to you and chat to you, but you were like, don't talk to me. I've got a deadline. And you were just seen as rude because you weren't, conversing with everybody. But then equally, I couldn't ask to stay home and do my work because I had a deadline and I wanted to focus. So it was just like a really hard toss up. Whereas now we have the ability to be able to choose that. And I think that's what's so difficult that I think Gen Z didn't get to experience almost and see, at least in like an office environment, because you do have jobs where you are at work every day, warehouses or shops, whatever it might be. But that's been something that's been interesting to see is their perception of what working in an office is.
Mm.
And I do agree. I think that element of togetherness and the gossip and all of that stuff, it's really, really kind of like it's easier to do in person. But equally, when we did our survey, a lot of the team were saying that actually they find that they can just as easily message each other, and I mean, we even have that. We'll have like a chat for literally just random crap where people will put in the dumbest questions you can think of and just start the most random conversations. I think a lot of people that are maybe younger aren't as comfortable doing that. I don't know. I don't know. What do you think is the reason for that?
Yeah, it is a strange one because I would have expected like Gen Z
Yeah.
be like, oh, yeah, fully remote. I want to be home and like watch memes on
Yeah.
my Instagram. But it
Yeah.
is the complete opposite, which surprises me. And I think it probably comes down to the fact that they've never like experienced the working environment
Mm,
much, or
yeah.
those who are just coming into work, that was their expectation from like a young age, that they'd be going into an office with a shirt and a tie and
Yeah.
all of these things. And perhaps once they experience that properly, they will then
Hmm.
turn into, oh yeah, I'm paying an extra £300 a month just to commute in, and
Hmm.
the office sucks, because not everyone has a great
Yeah.
office. Like some
No, that's
companies
true.
have amazing offices. I think agencies in particular will have like really flashy offices and perks.
Yeah.
But I've worked at some places where you have to show up with a shirt and tie, and all the girls have to wear tights and skirts, and you've got these fluorescent lights above your head with a
Yeah.
slight buzz to them, and then you've got some guy called Gary who's been there for 50 fucking years, who's pouring himself the worst cup of coffee you've ever tasted in your
Mm,
life, and you just think this can't be my life. And I think it's just a lack of experience in
yeah.
those areas. But when I put a post out on LinkedIn, and I titled it, let me finally put the working from home debate to bed.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I just basically put my opinion on working from home, which is, just give people the option to either come into the office or not. And whatever
Yeah.
happens, happens. One of the comments, because a lot of it was in support, but one of the comments was, well, so do you still pay for an office, business rates, and all the overheads that go with it, even if the office is entirely empty? Or do you opt to just not have an office at all and
Yeah.
keep the profits and give the team a raise?
Interesting question. I mean, it's a valid question, but like I said at the start, a lot of businesses ask you to come to the office because they pay a lot for a fancy office. So they want to get their money's worth out of you. As mean as that sounds, that is the truth. So I do understand the question. It's a valid question. What do you think?
I think, yes, there's a cost to an office. You've got business rates, you've got the rent, you've got the service charges, the insurances and things like that. But I
Yeah.
think giving people the best of both worlds is always the way to go, and that's a business cost to me. And I think there are many
Hmm.
ways now that you can actually optimize that so you don't actually have a giant bill for an office that's barely used.
Yeah.
And that's
Yeah.
called shared spaces.
Yeah.
Something we've done from the
Yeah.
get-go at Search Theory is that we got shared offices. So one is on Deansgate, very prestigious place. We've took clients there, we've booked out meeting rooms. They a lot of them think we pay an absolute fortune for it. The reality is it's like £300-400 a month. It's the
Hmm.
same with the office down in Cheltenham. Did I say that right?
You did.
um,
You did.
okay. I butcher it so much, but it's the same with that. Like we pay when we use it, and we can
Yeah.
have the space when we use it. And I think there are alternative ways to look at it. Like I understand if you have, a 5-year lease that's several £1,000s a month, it's going to be tough.
Yeah.
But I still do believe that if you got to the point where you've already got that office, you've probably got a big enough team that at least half of the people will still come in because they want
Yeah.
to, and
Yeah.
that will be better than half of the team being upset because they're forced to work from home, and half of the team being upset because they don't get to work from home because you're
Mm,
punishing them because you pay so much for rates. So I think my opinion on that is you've got to understand what the market wants, and I think at the minute the market wants hybrid by and large. And so I
yeah.
think giving both options and giving freedoms is where you'll get the best talent, and there are many ways to optimize the cost for it if you're not already tied down to a lease. And even if you are, I still think your office is going to get used. I very much highly doubt it's going to be empty.
Yeah, and to be fair, I've worked for a place like that, and it was empty. Half of it was empty, but I think half of it was the owner just wanting everybody in all the
Mm,
time, and he got the biggest office space possible in the building, and it was just a bit silly because he got the space, and I would get angry that people wanted to work from home sometimes and didn't want to be there every single day because he came in all the time, and it was like great that you love it and you live around the corner. But some of us travel over an hour to get in. Some of us have children. We need to have flexible working. Like it wasn't what he thought it was. I think one of the things that I found interesting, and I see this a lot on LinkedIn as well as you do, is that there is a mix of those old, I don't want to sound sexist and ageist here, but it is older men who just expect everybody to be in the office all the time,
literally.
or women who just they don't have anything else to do, so they just want their team there all the time. But a lot of us do have families, we do have other things to do. And the reality is, no employee is going to be as passionate about your business as the business owner is. No one's going to love search theory more than me and you ever will,
Hmm.
because it's our business. We built it. We're responsible for it. We have to sit and deal with taxes for it. That's our thing. I would never expect an employee to want to come in all the time because they love search theory so much. I would actually think it's a bit like, I would question, are they okay if they felt that way? It's not normal. You cannot be that passionate. So I think, I don't know. I just think there's an expectation of this like calls and online world is ruining the work. It isn't. I really don't think it is. I think people work in different ways, and expecting your product, your services to get better just because you have everybody in the office 5 days a week or 3 days a week. I just think that's a bit of there's a deeper issue that you need to look under it, and it isn't people working from home.
Yeah, I completely agree because, we've experienced that firsthand. We've had periods of time where I think me and you in the same business where we were renovating an office and everyone had to go remote for 2-3 months. And then when they were back in the office for 3 days a week, I wouldn't say there was any significant statistical performance issues,
No,
spikes or downfalls
no,
from either of the two. Like at the end of the day, people just got their work done to a high standard on
yeah,
time, and we never had
yeah,
an issue with delivery when working
yeah,
remote or working in the office. And I think
yeah,
in a lot of the cases, it was that some people fell behind because they were in the office so much and they were chatting away. And so they would have to delay
yeah,
that work or go home and do it later that night. I've done
yeah.
that many times before where I'm like,
Same.
God, it's 5 p.m. and I haven't done what I'm supposed to do. So I'm going to have to go home and
Yeah,
do work.
yeah,
In addition to that, I think, a lot of business owners who have been in business for a very long time, you can understand that, yes, they're in the business and they probably pay themselves a way above average wage. And understanding that is key because
yeah,
my cost to go into the office full time and park in Manchester City Centre, if I was going 5 days a week right now, would be £450 a month in parking fees. And then I would probably be tempted to buy lunch at expensive places in
yeah,
the city because why not? I'm just there. I can't be bothered to make it at home because I'm having to get up so early. And so the additional cost and strain that it puts on employers, I feel like founders and business owners need to recognize more, because at the moment, people are struggling to find an extra £100 a month in the
yeah,
pay slip, let alone 3, 4, 500.
yeah, yeah.
Um, I feel like you need to be in touch with where people's finances are as well as where their heads are
Mm,
at, because for some it's just not possible. And
no,
I've I've had in previous businesses that I've been at, I've had employees resent the business and absolutely resent their job because they have to go in every day. And I've seen, they've pulled up their phone and said, this is my monthly cost for the train, for my lunch, and this is just because you want me in the office when I can work from home. I've had people confront me
yeah,
with that before, where it's not
yeah,
my decision to
same.
let them work fully remote.
Yeah,
And it's staggering. And you go, okay, well, your costs are 200 a month. And then the counter argument is, well, everyone else is paying for it and stuff. And then they're like, well, yeah,
yeah,
I get paid £2,000 a month. And after all my bills, I'm left with 200 quid. So where do you
yeah,
expect me to find the extra money to go on holiday and actually book a holiday, or, buy
yeah,
food or account for inflation? And hearing those stories and being in touch with your employees is so important, and so many people aren't.
They're not. And I think that I think what I really struggled, and this was something that you and I talked about as well, is it wasn't until I actually worked at, well, to be fair, I think it was our last job where we met. And then one years and years and years ago where I had flexible working, as in whenever I came in, as long as I did the 7.5 hours, depending on how you run your business, then I could go home. But I have had a job where it was literally, you had set hours. So they gave you a sense of illusion that you get to pick, because it was like, you can come in at 8:30 or 9. Which window do you want to choose? It was literally like that. I kid you not. You had to choose a window.
My God.
And it was like, you had to come in during your window, right? And if you didn't come in during your window, you would get a text message like, oh, are you late today? Are you coming in today? They had to come in during your window. And then if you finished during your window, but you still had work to do, it was massively frowned upon, because it was like, what do you mean you're going home to finish your work? And it's like, I want to go home and eat my freaking dinner, and then I can finish the work. That's fine. But can I just go home, see my family, eat a dinner, and just maybe it'll be easier for me to finish my work in the evening when I've had time to like unwind. And I think one thing I find interesting about how we're doing things here is that I don't really care I don't care when you do your work. As long as you're contactable during work hours and you show up to meetings and calls, if you're doing your work at 10 p.m., that is none of my business, unless you literally are that stacked, in which case it is my business. If it is just a case of during the day, I couldn't focus, I don't do great during the daytime, but in the evening, because I'm a night owl, I'll get everything done 10 times faster. Then who am I to question that? As long as it's there for the deadline, I don't think it really matters that much. And I think the argument I always had whenever I raised this, and I would say to my boss and say, look, does it matter when they do their work as long as it's done on time? His answer was always, well, are they actually doing the work? Are they actually doing the work? And it was like, genuinely, it was like, are they actually doing the work? I think they're just abusing the fact that they can work from home, and abusing that they can leave on time. Literally abusing that you can leave on time, because you're allowed to leave on time. Um, and my answer to that is yes, people will abuse it, but I think it's pretty easy to spot it, because if the work isn't turned in on time, then I know you're not working, in which case you are abusing the policy. So you will not be working here for much longer. But what does it matter what time people do the work? I just don't think I ever understood that.
No, I don't either as well, because, at the end of the day, people have, if you're a good manager, people will have like
Mm.
KPIs, and they'll
Yeah.
know where they're heading and what they need to do to achieve their goals. And they'll have the daily, monthly, weekly work schedule, which will be usually in a system. So, the simple answer is that if someone is abusing that system, it will show up in that KPI.
Yeah,
If they're abusing
definitely.
it and they're meeting all their KPIs, who gives a fuck? No one gives a fuck.
Yeah.
I did a search on Reddit, like, for the worst habits that people have when working from home. And I think the
Yeah.
sooner you get over these as like a owner, manager, whatever, the better.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
we all do this. Everyone's guilty of this. Scrolling on their phone, doom
Yeah.
scrolling on Instagram, sending reels, people not changing out of their sleep clothes. I think the funniest one I've got here is, I wake up at 8:59 and start at 9. Like,
Nice.
or,
Impressive.
or just working from your sofa, or working from your bed,
Yeah.
or doing
Yeah.
your washing like at 2 p.m.
Yeah.
Everyone does those things, and that's the beauty of it. Like, you are genuinely, most employees are going to save 2 hours in their work day by not commuting, and so they're going to fill that stuff with other bits in between. But at the end of the day,
Mm.
the work gets done. Who gives a shit what they do outside of that? We don't own people.
Yeah.
They're not slaves. Like, I don't understand
No.
that either.
I mean, it's, to be honest, the argument I've heard, I've had that conversation before. The argument literally was, well, I paid them for 7 hours a day, so I expect them at their desk for 7 hours a day. And it's just like, okay, but like, it got to a point where I was like, do we need to log time for going to the toilet? Is that what
Yeah,
you'd like to
it's
see, that we log? It's just not normal. And I think I understand the whole, we pay for X amount of time. Yes, they are being paid for X amount of time. But realistically, again, you're actually paying them to do a job. So if they've done the job and they've done the work, doesn't matter if they spent 6.5 hours doing it instead of 7, and that they did all of it at different times. Like, does it actually matter? I think, there are things where we have to remain professional. Like, let's be real. Don't show up in your pajamas to a client call. That's just obnoxious. Be responsive. I think we as an agency, we have KPIs and SLAs where we say to everybody that during work hours, if we know that you've clocked in or you're online, you are expected to respond within 10 to 15 minutes, unless you're on a call, in which case respond after your call. So we do have those expectations, but we always make that very clear and say, look, like, you get to have really flexible working, but here are also our rules around it. So you will respond, you are going to go on calls, you are going to do emails. Like, if I see that you haven't responded to something for a very long time, I am going to assume that you're just pissing about, which isn't okay if you do have stuff to do. But also, I'm not going to be mad if someone's filling their dishwasher between writing freaking landing pages. Like, if that's what helps you focus, who am I to judge? I
For
send
sure.
I send you I send you memes in the middle of the day sometimes. So
Yeah, we're all guilty
it
of it.
happens. Yeah, it happens. Like, it does genuinely happen. And I think there is that kind of weird stance of just, oh, we have to do this or we have to do that. And I think it's interesting how people perceive it, that, I don't know, I have to be at my desk doing this and that. And it's really, like you said, it's so easy to spot if someone isn't doing work. Like, it's so easy to spot. Like, if the stands are crap, if the work isn't good. And that's what managers are for, to spot those things. And I think maybe that's where business owners don't trust their managers and
Mm.
they don't trust their leadership team. And they have problems with maybe micromanaging. I think a lot of business owners are really bad for micromanaging and sticking their beak into everything. And I think there comes a point as an owner where you need to step back. You need to trust your team.
Yeah, and also, like, when we work on computers all day, I think it's very clear that, if you are using a computer, I think I don't know what body it is, but the government recommends that every hour you have a 5 to 10 micro break.
Yeah.
5 to 10 minute micro break. And so, people will take advantage of that. But when you're in the office, no one's doing that. No one's going to
No.
do it because they feel guilty, or they feel like they're being watched.
Mm,
Like, oh, you've gone outside for a walk for 10 minutes. Where were you? What were
yeah.
you doing? And that's the kind of attitude that is in a lot of business at the moment. And so
Yeah.
people feel guilty. I mean, especially me, like when several years ago when I moved to Manchester, and I started working for an agency, because I tried out a couple before I landed at a longer term business, but we had clocking cards. So every time
Yeah.
we went into the office, we'd have to swipe. Every time we exited, we'd have to
Yeah.
swipe. And so I went on my lunch break once and, swiped out. We got 30 minutes, and I walked to, it's near the social chain offices at Portland Road, I think it was, and
Yeah.
got a
Yeah.
meal deal. And then I sat outside because it was a sunny day, and I ate my lunch. And I come back and I clocked back in, not thinking about it. I was as quick as I could be. And the operations manager came up to me and was like, "You took 31 minutes instead of 30. Like, you've got to make sure and you've got to make sure that you've got to be here at least like 1 to 2 minutes early, so you don't go over the clock." She said, "Because if I keep doing it, they'll start docking my wages for my, like, the minutes that I were late." And they did that for like
God.
start times and finish times as well. But they weren't.
Yeah, I've
They,
heard
they,
that.
they didn't pull you up when you would do 3 hours overtime. They wouldn't turn around and go, "Oh,
No,
well
no,
done,
no.
good job." And
Here's
that,
extra money for your
yeah.
overtime.
I would always say, well, I've done like 15 hours overtime this month and you're kicking my ass over 1 minute. And I think that kind of behavior in work, when forcing people to be in the office and be on time and be so stringent, will create resentment that will have the opposite effect of what you're trying to do. So if you're trying to
Yeah.
get people to be more productive by getting them to come on the dot on time and absolutely
Yeah.
be in the office 5 days a week, you will find yourself in the opposite camp of employers aren't productive, they hate your guts, and they're looking for a new job as soon as
Yeah.
possible. And you have to pay more for recruiters, you're going to have to pay
Yeah.
more to train someone up, and you're just going to have a bunch of unhappy people who think you're an absolute cunt. So,
Yeah. And
I,
and
I
and who could blame them? But, like, genuinely, I've heard, now you've said it. And actually, I do remember I was managing a team of 12 and they had their windows. And I once got told by my boss that I need to speak to my team that when their start window, whatever is 9 o'clock, for example, that means they're already they coffee, they've already sorted themselves out and are actually sitting at, they're just working at 9, which means they need to get to the office 15 minutes earlier to start their day so that they're working at 9 o'clock. And I remember just sitting there like, that is insane. Like, it's very fascist. Why are we being so fascist about a 15-minute window of when you've made your coffee? Like, does it matter? Does it really genuinely, like, what is that 15 minutes going to save you?
Yeah,
Nothing.
my first boomer boss said that to me. If you're not 15 minutes early, 15 minutes. I've heard that. Everyone's heard that at one
I
point.
mean,
It's so
like,
ridiculous.
I grew up with a dad whose logic was if you're on time, you're late. So I've always been early to everything because it was just
Yeah,
ingrained in me from when I was little that if you're on time, you're late. So, but that's like it's just like a different thing. But I feel like at work, if we're policing people that much, it's just a bit crazy. And like you said, we don't track the overtime. So all the time where people actually put in more hours. And one thing I found interesting, and I guess this is my last point on all of this, in our kind of like survey, when we asked people that work from home, do you actually do more work or less work? Every single one of them said that I actually end up doing more work and going over my hours because I don't notice the time going by. And maybe there needs to be better boundaries. I think people do need to be better at switching off because it's hard to switch off at home, I think. But they do more work. They do go over time. So they kind of feel like if I'm given the flexibility and the trust and respect, then I actually end up doing more for the company without complaining about it if they just leave me alone and let me be. And I think that was really interesting. And to be fair, I do that as well. Like, because I work from home, I'll end up doing more because I just don't notice the time, or I'll in the evening think of something like, actually, let me just quickly do this whilst I'm thinking of it. And it does creep up on you, which I think is a whole host of other problems where people do need to put boundaries sometimes in place. But
for sure.
it is interesting, isn't it? Actually, being at home, you will end up doing more for the company because you're not just bothered with clock watching.
Yeah, and you have the freedom of choice to, like, live where you like, so that means cheaper
Yeah.
areas. I got out of the city 5 years ago, pretty much this month. So I used to pay £1,550 a month for a two-bed apartment, which was still small.
Yeah. Yeah.
And the council tax on that would be, it was the higher band. So that would be like 200 and something pounds a month. And I just
Mm,
remember looking at and I was literally like 5 minute walk away from the office. So that was the benefit,
yeah.
right? It was like, oh, I can get to
Yeah.
the office easy. And this was back when 5 days a week was like, there was no working
Yeah.
from
Yeah.
home pretty
Yeah.
much. It was
Yeah.
very rare. And that for me was just soul destroying, seeing that money just go away. So when I got
Yeah.
out of the city and bought my own home, which I'm a 35-minute drive away from Manchester right now, it was such a relief being able to because my living cost went down by like 4 or 5 times, and my
Yeah.
happiness went up massively because I didn't have
Yeah.
to sit, like worry about commuting in, and I could work from home even though I was a
Mm,
little bit further away. So I think it does open up opportunities for employees, and I think
does.
in this market, especially with how competitive it is, I think we can attract the best talent in the world by having the best flexibility policy, because no one's getting good talent on 5 days a week. Trust me,
No,
no
no,
one.
it's not the time. And it's like you said, it opens up the opportunity. Like, I live in the middle of nowhere and I can live in the middle of nowhere. And if I were to need a job, I could get a job anywhere as long as they offer remote working. And there's so many great people who would be excellent employees, but because they're stuck in, say, they might live in a little tiny town and their only opportunities are around them, or they have to travel 2 hours and it's exhausting. So then you're not getting the most out of them, but actually giving them flexibility. They might only come to your office once or twice a month, but you're getting a fantastic professional. So why shouldn't we be open to that, and just let people work from home and at least get great talent that we would have otherwise missed? And I think that's a really, really great point that a lot of companies are missing out on.
Absolutely. So I think we agree that working from home is a must if you're able, and it's a
Mm.
must if that employer is enable to their employees. And the benefits of that is that you do get increased productivity by working from home. The slight negative is the culture side, which can be fixed with a hybrid approach by giving people the
Yeah.
option. I think forcing them is not the way to go. Giving the option
No.
is definitely the way.
Yeah.
So yeah, do any of the listeners agree with our opinion? Let us know in the comments. Also, do like and rate the podcast if you enjoy it. But that's mine and Sarah's views and breakdown on working from home, and that comes from decades of experience. You know, we're not newbies to this.
Yeah.
So
No. From all sorts. We have done 5 days a week. We know what we're talking about.
yeah. So yeah, thanks for watching and listening, everyone, and stay tuned for the next episode.